Okay, hello and welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about the price elasticity of demand, and then I'm going to go to a slide where I'm going to sort of illustrate this in some sense. But the price elasticity of demand, what this is doing is this is giving us an important way to get a window into the responsiveness of consumer demand to changes in price. So our starting point is we already know by the law of demand, when prices rise, the quantity demanded will fall. Right? When prices rise, quantity demanded falls. When prices fall, quantity demanded will rise. That's just the law of demand. What elasticity is giving us above and beyond this is it's giving us a way to think about the responsiveness, the magnitude, how much that change is. So if demand is really responsive to price, we would say demand is elastic. And this would happen if there's many alternatives, many substitutes. So for instance, if you go into the pharmacy aisle of a store, you'll notice there's a lot of over-the-counter pain or cold medicine. There's a lot of different substitutes. So we'd expect people's responsiveness to price changes might be relatively high. They might have pretty responsive demand. On the other hand, if demand is really unresponsive to price, we would say demand is inelastic. And this would happen if there's very few alternatives, such as demand for cardiologist services. Right? Like if somebody is having a problem with their heart, their circulatory system, there's very few legitimate substitutes to just going to see the cardiologist, the specialist, right? Contrast that with the situation with over-the-counter pain or cold medicine. You've got a lot of legitimate substitutes, among which one of them is actually just like doing nothing if you have a cold or if you have some type of pain that'll ultimately resolve. But if you have something where there really is only one treatment or one course of action, now your demand's going to be pretty unresponsive to price because you do actually need that one thing. There's very few substitutes around. Formally, we're saying the price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded for a given percentage change in price. We're expressing this as a unitless value. It's not going to have units on it. It's not going to have a percent on it. It's just going to be a numerical value. And actually, I think probably the most important way to interpret the elasticity is to remember where it's coming from. It's literally coming from a ratio. The numerator is going to be the percentage change in quantity. The denominator is the percentage change in price. And this gives rise to a really interesting interpretation. If the elasticity is larger than 1 in absolute value, that would correspond to elastic demand, very responsive demand. That can only happen if the numerator, if the quantity change is larger than the denominator, the price change. Elasticity numbers smaller than 1 in absolute value would correspond to inelastic demand. This can only happen when the numerator change is smaller than the denominator change. I'm going to try to show this with sort of like a cartoonish representation. So the price elasticity of demand is literally, so E for price elasticity demand, the percentage change in quantity, this is percentage, this delta, this Greek letter for change, so delta, quantity divided by percentage change in price. This is literally percentage change in quantity associated with a percentage change in price. And notice, if the numerator is bigger than the denominator, think of fractions like 2 over 1, 3 over 2, 4 over 3, 5 over 2. Then the numerator is larger, the quantity change is bigger than the price change. This means there's a small price change, a huge quantity change. That's very responsive. Demand would be very responsive, very elastic. If the quantity change is smaller than the price change, think of fractions like 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/10, right? Then the demand is very unresponsive, very inelastic. Why? Because here we have a massive price change, but a very small quantity response. That's unresponsive or inelastic demand. That's the basic idea with interpreting the numerical values that you'd get from price elasticity of demand. But the larger concept that you want to sort of be familiar with is the basic idea that if demand is responsive to price, we'd say demand is elastic. And that happens when there's substitutes or alternatives. If demand is very unresponsive to price, we'd say demand is inelastic. This happens when there's very few good alternatives. There's some other elasticities that are relevant, so like the cross-price elasticity or the income elasticity. Those behave very much like this. The cross-price elasticity of demand is just looking at the percentage change in the price of one good and how this is going to affect the percentage quantity change, the percentage change in the quantity of some other good. So you might be interested in saying, well, if my rival raises their price, how does this affect my demand? That's a question for cross-price elasticity, right? For income elasticity, that's a question saying if people's incomes rise, how is that going to affect our demand? And so it's the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in income for income elasticity. Anyway, both of these actually behave very similar. We're thinking about like what degree of responsiveness is there associated with a given change, and that's what elasticity is all about.